Kick us off.
Hey Kieran, how are you doing? John Harrington here. Kieran, you've Ross McQuillan back this year. That must be a nice boost for you.
Yeah, no, it's great to see Ross back in. He's been away and seemed to enjoy his time over there, but home was calling to him. So yeah, it's great to have him back in the panel.
And I presume he's obviously in great physical nick coming back. The time away from Gaelic football, how is he? I mean, is he back up to speed straight away, or what's it like?
Yeah, well, Ross was always in good physical nick, but I'd say it even see himself there wouldn't be much difference now between the Aussie Rules boys and our fellas. In terms of it's a wee bit different of a game, but like the role that he was playing there, was similar to like a wing back, wing forward, so it would have been similar type of training. So but like he's like his dad. Athleticism comes easy to him.
Will it help the likes of Ross and the O'Neills to have be working with someone like Kieran McGeeney? With Kieran Donaghy now as part of your backroom team?
Yeah, well, we hope so. Like we have Kieran Donaghy in this year, and Kieran McKeever and Kieran McKinney. It seems to be like the four Kierans. We've track when they're given out to us. It definitely will. But we had great coaches in too. Like we had John there, Paddy McKeever. Like we've done it all at the top level as well, and obviously Jim. So it's a different slant. But I suppose the reason I went after Kieran was Kieran made a career out of bringing other people into the game. And I just think that's something that we were sort of missing in Armagh. It's always hard to explain to people, but sometimes you can have too many good forwards, and you need people to make them tick a bit, like sort of Kilkenny does, like what Dublin or Kieran would have done for Kerry and things like that. So I just thought Kieran would have had that type of background, and then his basketball too. But similar, Kieran McKeever would be quite similar. Like obviously being captain of Armagh and centre back, but that was a big part of what he does. Like is bringing other people into the game, and then obviously Kieran McKinney being a goalkeeper. Last man back, and his whole job was to make everybody else look good. So, yeah, we would have a sort of what I would class as a team now that are trying to bring a different perspective to the squad, like in terms of bringing each other into the game, and not just always being sort of maybe thinking of just the next ball, but trying to think about how to play as a team. So, like a Kieran, the three Kierans would definitely bring that to it now.
I suppose we're used to seeing Ulster coaches go out of Ulster and coach in different counties, not so much like coaches from outside of Ulster come into Ulster counties. Does someone from Kerry bring a different sort of something totally different, or coming into Ulster, or what's the dynamic there like?
Yeah, well, Kieran's a very gregarious type of character anyway. Like, he's good fun. Although they find it hard to stop laughing at me all the time, it's good to have somebody else in with a sense of humour. So he brings that type of sort of edge to it. But I remember at my wedding, my dad sort of slagging all the Kerry ones, sort of saying now that we have a Kerry woman in the family, we can get all the skill of the Armagh people and all the dirt of the Kerry ones, and it should be a good balance. So I'll be slagging Kieran about that. But no, he brings a different perspective to it. I think though, I don't think it's so much like where people come from. It's the path to that point. And then Kieran with basketball, I also think the fact that he got into, although playing underage with Kerry, he got in through the underdog system. He's great humility about him as well. He's loads of All-Irelands in the back pockets and All-Stars and things like that. International rules, he's got everything, but there's a great humility about him too. There's a great humour about the way he does things. And I just think that sort of thing sort of adds to any setup. I don't think it really sort of makes a difference where you're from, but your characteristics that you bring to it definitely add a different dimension. And I think the three Kierans have all their own character, but Kieran's as I say, pathway has definitely has given him all the attributes for a great coach.
Nice, Kieran.
Kieran, Conor McKeown here from the Irish Independent. How are you?
Good, Conor.
Kieran, just on that, when you're talking about the ability to bring other players into the game, what specifically are you trying to eradicate? It's not presumably sort of selfishness on the ball. Is it sort of a greater awareness of other players' movement, or what is it?
There's probably different aspects of it. I think to be a very good forward, you have to have a small line of selfishness. You have to have that sort of striker's impact as well and things. But the way the game was progressed, as it was over the years, when people have got a wee bit more sensible in how to play the game, defensive systems and offensive systems, people think wouldn't have changed, but as we all know, things have now. And despite defenses, teams are able to break them down. But the only way to break them down is to actually using each other, and setting things up, and like there's more set plays, different things involved in it. So again, like that's I suppose the area that I'm sort of looking at. That it's not all about just looking for that particular shot, but like how to set up that shot, looking and how to be able to take defenses apart, like and create that space. And I suppose again, like with basketball, or that type of approach, like is always been present there.
Yeah, and just on something completely different, like, obviously you're back training for the last couple of weeks, and obviously there was a couple of high-profile breaches of the training ban, which never would have been an issue had inter-county players retained their elite status. Like, what would your view on that have been? Like, do you think the GA should have maybe have fought a little bit harder so that inter-county teams could have kept training through that lockdown?
I suppose the one thing the pandemic has showed us is that we all have opinions, and maybe one of the sad things about that is that we're all dressing our opinions up as facts. So the answer is I don't know. I have my own strong opinions about like whether we're at the same level as other sports or not, but that's just an opinion. It's just, that's all it is. We are who we are, and I'm sure they've reached those decisions based on whatever information they've had at their disposal. So I don't know what information that was, but I take it that's why they did it.
Okay, cheers, Kieran.
All right, cheers, Colin.
Kieran, how's it going? It's Niall McIntyre here. Just on the kind of subject of like the lockdown and that, and like it's nearly 6 months since you last played a game, like, and like players have been doing a lot of training on their own in the last like year or two. Like, do you think like the fact that they're training on their own, like it's probably more difficult than being in a group? Do you think it kind of could build a player's mental toughness even a little bit?
I don't know about the mental toughness, but I definitely think personal responsibility has played a big part. There's no necessity to do anything now, or hasn't been for a number of months. So I suppose it's a personal choice. And we often talk about like amateur sports, professional sports, and elite sports, and all of those sort of different titles. But I think no matter what you do, if you're trying to do your best, it's something that comes down to personal responsibility and doing the best that you can. So I would say that's probably the biggest thing that has come out of it. It comes down to a personal choice, what you want to do in your time away from everything else. And I do believe that it has helped. The interconnections that we all strive for is missing, and whether that's work and family and team, that's been a big miss. But I do see a lot of maturity in a lot of the fellas in terms of taking responsibility for their not so much own training, but definitely for their own performance or their own attitude and desire, which I think has been a big plus.
And how did you find the last 6 or 7 months? Like, were you always eager to get back, or did you kind of enjoy the break? It was probably your first break from football in a while. Like, at the very start of the lockdown, I had to go in for an operation. I had to get my shoulder reconstructed, so I had to get 5 muscles cut off and reattached. So my head was elsewhere for the first part of the lockdown. And then for the second one, I suppose, like, it's not knowing was the big part. Like, there was no specific plan for anybody in the country. Like, you don't know whether it was going to be the next month or the month after or the month after. I suppose that was the hardest part of it, like just not knowing any particular plan. But everybody was in the same boat, so you just had to roll with it. But yeah, look, I had young kids, and the crack was good at home. Just teaching and playing and kicking about and stuff like that. There was definitely plenty happening to keep me busy. Thanks, Kieran.
No problem, Matt. Is that it?
I'll jump in there. Kieran, how you doing? It's Ian O'Riordan here. Can't sure if you can see me there. I missed the start of that. The shoulder operation. What exactly happened there? I might have missed the information there. But what exactly caused the injury?
Years of self-abuse and self-harm, I suppose. So I got caught with a Kimura then, at the end of it, and that was a couple of years ago, and then I fell in with training and a whole lot of different things. It was just years of taking hits and bangs and knocks, and just eventually it was. And when I went in to do the repair, like, some of the things were just hanging on by threads, so I had to sort of take them off and reattach them and do that sort of stuff. So just call getting old, Ian. Unfortunately, it's just the best of us, but it's one of those things.
Yeah. You were quite philosophical there about the pandemic and how it's people's opinions and facts and all of that. I mean, did it change you in any profound way, or is it just still the same Kieran McGeeney who's come out of it?
It's a good question, but I don't know. I suppose it changes all to some degree. But, like you just, I suppose looking at how other sports are looked upon, like in the last 4 months, all we could read about like is rugby and soccer, and we've seen no Gaelic at all. Maybe a couple of stories here or there. So it's been interesting to watch their sports talk about themselves compared to us. Like.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah, well, there's probably a couple of headlines in that one, but I think I'll keep them to myself.
Okay. Cheers, thank you.
No problem, mate. Cheers.
Hi, Kieran. It's Conor Neville here from RT Sport. How do you feel about your fairly regional National League programme this year? It's entirely Ulster teams. I mean, would you have preferred to have a tilt at Kerry or Dublin now that you're up in Division 1 for the first time in a while? Yeah,
well, I say that this side of the games, Conor. Maybe if you had asked me after the games, it would have been a different sort of reply. Okay, it's probably a wee bit incestuous. Like, we have like Monaghan, Tyrone and Donegal and ourselves, although it's new for us to go back to the first division for a while, but it would have been nice to sort of travel around and see some of the other teams. But listen, we're all in the same boat. As I said, like it's there's no point in giving out or complaining. Like they're going to be very tough games for us, but we're all well aware of each other, and we'll probably see us probably as the sort of whipping boys coming up. But like we're hoping we'll give a good account of ourselves. Like, but it's going to be hard and heavy. Like 3 Sundays in a row, and then like a playoff or a relegation game against one of the 3 teams, and so it's in 4 weeks. So yeah, it's going to be quite tough. But I could see why they did it at the start. So you can see why they do these things, but again, it is what it is.
The Monaghan, I suppose you can't really do shadow boxing against Monaghan given the importance of at least winning one of these games, because you are likely to play Monaghan, I suppose, in the Ulster semi-final. I mean, there's not any chance for mind games really in the league or misdirection or anything like that.
Yeah. One thing that you learn in Ulster very quickly, what I do maybe, is that you don't even take any games. Like I think Cavan only managed to get past Antrim last year by a point, was it, like in the first game? I can remember. So like, we would just be focusing on that, like, and even up until that, kind of, we probably just, I suppose, Monaghan and Armagh will look at each other as a way of trying to sort of like getting a good start and getting 2 points on the board. And I'm sure the other teams will probably look at us as the 2 sort of lesser teams in it, and like trying to get a good start, like would be really like on the top of both our lists to get going and give us a good foothold, like to try them and get another game. So I would say no, you're right. There'll be very little shadow box, and it'll be both teams going hell for leather to see if they can get 2 points on the board. And all other games, although in the very near future, will seem like a good distance away when we line out on Sunday.
How anxious have you been to get into Division 1? I mean, would you say not being in the top tier has been a real sort of stall in your development over the last
year? I think it's taken us, like another 6 years to bounce up there. But I know, I suppose, in people's world that's a long time, but it's not to try and get somewhere that can stay there. We would see it like as paramount, because obviously in the past, like when the pressures come on, like we haven't responded the way we would like. So having those types of games, like where they're going to be pressure on all the time, and in every game, is something that we badly need, and being able to react well to it. I think we've got good players and we've got a good squad. But like everything else, you have to learn to win those battles if you're ever going to win the wars. And we failed in a couple of those. So being in the first division, I think, is going to be paramount to like the development of this particular squad.
Cheers, best of luck.
Cheers, Conor.
Yeah, Philip Lanigan here. Kieran, how are you doing?
Good, Philip. How's you?
Good. Come here. Like, it's next year. It's maybe hard to believe it's coming 20 years since the All Ireland win. Like, is that, from your point of view, is that kind of hard to credit? And like, do you think about that moment once a year, once a week, once a day? Like, where does it fit in?
Probably doesn't fit in that much at all, to be honest. You just get caught up in what you're sort of doing now. 20 years ago, like, I have fellas that I'm working with that weren't even born. So it's funny, like at the start when you started using examples of, you might like sort of reference different players that they could look at and stuff like that. And when they're looking at you going like, who the fuck's he? You're definitely getting old. So, and earlier on talking about the likes of Ross and Falkers, like all of them, I played with their dads, and like you just go, like even seeing that sentence, I played with your dad, like, and it's feeling like old, like, and just, I remember talking to like a friend of mine, and so like when you're looking out through your own eyes, you still see the world the same way as you did 25 years ago. But the ones that are looking back at you just see somebody who's old and grey and maybe full of shit. So it's just you have to be wary of that particular thing. Like that, although I might see the world in the same way, they're not looking back at me in the same way as I'm looking at them.
And you've always kind of said in looking at the world that geography shouldn't decide whether you're an All-Ireland contender. But like you look at Kieran Donaghy and you look at maybe what Dublin have achieved recently, it still does. So how is it that geography still decides whether you're an All-Ireland contender or not?
I would say everybody here could probably answer that question. Like geography tends to like promote a culture. And a culture is a big thing. Like that. Like if you take it to anybody basically in a Kerry squad, like or even Cork, will mostly have a Munster medal under their belt by the time they hit 21, like at some level. And the fact that they're probably two predominantly football counties in the hurling province, and like it has the same thing. But if you just look at the history of Gaelic, like whether it's Galway, Mayo, Cork, Kerry, and Dublin, and another, like if you sit outside of those particular counties, there's the fact that they're like if you look at them, with larger populations as Dublin, that have huge rural populations as well as 2 or 3 of the big sort of towns. So you can see why those cultures have developed and why success has come there. But then, like when you expect success and desire success like that, then itself then like creates like a higher level of activity for people who want to play at that level, and therefore the bar is continuously rising. And they just think differently about all the stuff that they do. So, like in terms of technical ability, like I still think you can see at club level, it doesn't really make a difference where you're from. So it doesn't match the same way. So, although it's nothing to do with geography, I do think it does play a part, like in the culture of each county. Like.
And just last one, like you lived and worked and played in Dublin, and again you were there at a time when I suppose the dynamic was starting to change. Are you surprised with the way, given that your team were able to go toe to toe and beat Dublin, and how the dynamic has shifted to such a kind of extent that, like, clearly Dublin have dominated the last decade and are starting as they mean to go on?
I think it's interesting seeing it from the point of view when I was there. Like those players were starting to come through, and I suppose I was in the middle of it. But now that what everybody is calling the greatest team ever and some of the greatest players ever, the same people were calling them useless. Back then, like I remember people talking about individual players like Paul Flynn, like and club he was from and hadn't won anything, and James McCarthy and what had he done, and and like Johnny Cooper even in their own club and whether he had it or not to make it, and now everybody's saying how brilliant they are and stuff like this here. Like, and it's funny when you're in the media, like the way you're able to change tune and what do you call it, like pretend that you've known everything from the start. But those fellas put in a hell of a lot of work. Like that's the one that whether it's Dermot Conley or James McCarthy, and like you have to admire the work ethic that they've had over the last 6 or 7 years. Like I'm be a big admirer of what they do, but not just what they do, but how they behave. Like I would still see them around Dublin, and there's not one of them wouldn't stop and say hello to you, like a chat about football to you. Like there's no airs or graces or anything else. Like they know they've got there through hard work and dedication, and like they're all brilliant footballers too. But I think to date they've been a credit to their county and their clubs and themselves. So I think they've got what they deserve because they've put a hell of a lot in.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kieran.
Hi, Kieran. Brian Barry here from Sky Sports. How are things?
Good, Barry. How's things?
Good, thanks. Oisin McConville was saying the other week that it was his understanding that Jamie Clarke has gone off the panel. Is that right?
Yeah, I think Jamie's in Paris at the minute. Somebody was telling me. So,
is he?
Unless we're starting an international team, I'd say he's definitely out for this year.
Just players like that. He's obviously been in and out of the panel the last few years. Does it show that football doesn't have to be the be all and end all for some players?
No, I think the opposite. I think we're all caught in a time warp. So we are. There's more players. Like, we tend to focus in on maybe 4 or 5 players a year out of 3,000, whatever it is, like they're involved in inter-county, like, you know, so like male and female, like they like really commit to it. So I think it's a very small percentage, but everybody has a personal choice. Like Jamie is an exceptionally good fella. I have a lot of time for him personally, and like you know, he's always straight up like when he goes. But some people just have different like paths in life, and that's it. Like I don't really think it's got to do with the football or the commitment. Like they just tend to give commitment to other things, and some of them like aren't always work. It just depends where like you know, your cards are lying in your particular journey. So I would actually think the opposite of where you know, I think football nowadays is far more enjoyable. Like you have to remember when we were going back to training, like in traveling home, we're going back to run around the pitch. We had a pre-season in September, then another one in January and February, and then another one in April and May. And all we did was run. That's all we did, run. Like the summer months was great, but it still ran until the 2 weeks before the championship, where you were allowed to sharpen up and do some sprints. You know, like now it's just all football. Let's say the pre-season, it's football, game scenarios, more football. Like it's, like definitely the tail end of my career was beginning to become more like that. But like at the beginning, like I could have went for this 400, 800 meter runners. Like that's why Martin Quillen and those boys were killing you. Like you're going home depressed after running around sand dunes and uphills. And so you know, I think it's a great time to be involved in football. I genuinely do. I think it's moved on like exponentially in terms of what they're doing for their players, and even just to be able to access the different things that you can now as a footballer. Yes, it's not for everybody, and sometimes like you know, and especially when you're not getting first place football, it's very disgruntled, or you're not getting first team in your hurling or camogie, whatever it is. Like it's easy to be disgruntled because I suppose in any meritocracy, everybody's going to have an opinion. Like my opinions aren't necessarily right. Like a different manager might pick different players. But I think in general, the majority of players like are enjoying football and hurling.
Yep. Just a different question. Then. Last year's championship was obviously knockout. It was one bad day at the office for Armagh. That was it over. What are your thoughts on the GA going with the same format this year?
I suppose that's all we've had to play with. It would be better if we had more games. I think that, you know, in terms of people always giving out about training, but I think the best solution for less training is more games. Even the way, as I said, the season has went, it used to be every 2 weeks. You had 3 games and then you had 2 months off and then another 4 games every 2 weeks. And it gave too much time in between for people who'd like to do a bit of running. But now, over the last couple of years, when it's game, like, you know, you start in the Canada from the first weekend in January, it's just a game every week until basically the end of March, beginning of April. So it's all football, and I suppose the more games we have for our players, the better. But in the year that's in it, like the pandemic, we're all just very happy to have anything at all.
Cheers, Kieran.
Hi, Kieran. Carl O'Kane here. How are you getting on?
Good, Carl.
I suppose, Kieran, I was just wondering, like, how big a setback was the Donegal defeat last year? Because, like, he's looked to be in pretty good shape, and in there, you'd obviously landed Division 1 football and beaten Derry.
It was. Like, I suppose when you look back at it, like our first quarter, we should have been like sitting probably ahead, but that's the difference between like, the lower divisions and the top one. You make 1 or 2 mistakes, and a team like that will just like punish you. Like, you know, even when we were sitting, like we were against like a strong breeze and that, we made a few bad decisions, and it just ended up like in a goal and 3 points bang, and the next thing, like, you know, from being 2 points behind, like you're sitting at 8 points behind, the heads drop. Like, yeah, like it was. I think the hardest thing, Carl, was the fact that because of the pandemic, everybody just got up and went home. Or normally, you know, you can stay together, maybe even have a few drinks, and you know, you can win a few All-Irelands over a pint, like, and maybe lessen the blow. But that was hard, like, you know, just the team to go their own separate way after, you know, it was a very long year, a difficult year for like everybody, and just although it ended in a bad sort of note, like, you know, it was a decent year, but yeah, it was a bit of a kick in the stomach, like, but you know, we're back at it, and we're going to have to face them now in a couple of weeks, so we're going to have to get over it fairly quickly.
You're fairly clear there, and like the lessons that you learned from it, like you mentioned there, like they punish you if you make mistakes with it, or other sort of things as well you can take out of it.
I'll give you an example. So, because we're trying to learn from some of the mistakes, but you don't really know until you sort of meet opposition again. But what sort of areas are you thinking?
Oh no, sorry. I was just saying, what were you thinking yourself? In terms of that? Yeah,
the very simple things. Like, even things that we talked about, like we had no support play, like in a final third. Where we starts again, like maybe sort of panicking at different times. And, all of the different things that can happen in a particular game. Like, their rotational system is very hard to sort of deal with. Like most of their scores come from their backs. I think between Morgan, even though he sort of played in the half forward and up to half back, McHugh and Owen Gallagher, I think they scored about 1-8 between them. So like that's the way modern football is played. Like nearly your half forward line is sitting in your half back line, and the rotational system with Donegal, like they've worked very hard on it, like they're very good at it. So all of those things, they're a good team, and they've been thereabouts like for the best parts of a decade now.
That's still it's probably not a bad complaint to have. You said at the start you can nearly have too many good forwards, good scoring forwards. Definitely gives you the raw material to work with, doesn't it? There.
Well, it depends. Like if you sort of look at those players I was chatting about, their work ethic like allows them to play in defence, and the way they sort of do. So like the old sort of modern day Gaelic footballer, like that likes to stand close to goals and not do anything. If you compare them to like whether it's like Michael Murphy or Jim Langan or McHugh and that particular thing, or if you compare them to like Scully and Kilkenny, like all of them. Sean O'Shea, like they're able to play basically in any position from 5 up, and some of them even able to play deeper than that. And so that's a different thing than just being a good forward. That's being a good player.
Yeah. And how long did you leave the fellas alone, Kieran, after the defeat? Like you were saying that you couldn't meet up after. Do you do a call a week later, or do you just let them off for a while?
Most of them come back to you, like,
right.
Like the really good ones want to sort of learn, like, and move forward. Like, nobody wants to always be in the tail end of those defeats. So, like, they come back and they ask them questions. And, people who are like in general now, like things have changed, like in our society. Like people, like even though we talk about off season, but people train 3 or 4 nights a week now just to stay fit. So all of the fellas like are in that sort of league themselves. Like it used to be again like when you got off for the summer or when you went away to like for a couple of holidays, like you come back and maybe have a couple of excess baggages to remove for the first 4 or 5 weeks. But like for most players, like that, all that sort of stuff's behind them.
That's right.
So
thanks, Kieran.
No problem, John.
Cheers.
Kieran, hi, it's Gordon Manning here there, son. How are you?
Good, Gordon.
Thanks. Just 2 quick ones for me, Kieran. I believe you played Meath in a challenge match over the weekend. Just wondering, did any of the new rules come into play, or do you have any kind of what you're feeling on, I suppose, some of the new rules that will be used this year?
One of the new rules I seen was just at the bottom of it, like that all responsibility is the managers and they lose sideline privileges. So it was one of the big rules that was sort of coming at the bottom for all the COVID regulations and that. But in terms of general play, there wasn't anything that came up that showed a lot of the things that, like, I suppose that are the major sort of talking points, like I suppose with the penalty and the things like that. So the Merfronia, we wouldn't have been big into using that particular person anyway. Like I know a lot of people use it for different things. So that's not a big sort of knock for us. What else was there? There was only 3 or 4 ways. Like none of them really had a major impact on the game, but I'm sure the penalty one will come up somewhere along the line for somebody.
Do you have any general view on that, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing?
No, that's. I think it's just like I think refs find things hard enough to do. Like we're very specific on some rules and very vague on others, so it's just a hard job for a referee at the minute. I don't think it's made it any easier for them. So it's, but no doubt, like there'll be a controversial one. I've no doubts about that. Like so, but I think we like talking about those things anyway. So.
And then just finally for me, just the weekend coming, are any players that are out missing injury wise or just won't be available for you for the opening game?
Like we're all picking up knocks and bangs and stuff, but you're hoping some of them will come back into play. there's been a couple here and there, but we're definitely keeping our physios busy, but we're hoping to have as close to a full deck as we possibly can.
Thanks, Kieran.
No problem.
I'm just conscious of time there, everyone, so if we wants to finish this off. No.